But I think that being honest in that and understanding there's that level of grief because you're losing so much of your life and you don't realize it yet. It's a lot to deal with, but it's so much better to actually talk about the grief than to repress it, because I repressed it for years.
This episode of The Recovery Couch is brought to you by Greg Swartz at Remax Victory and Affiliates. Greg brings heart, hustle, and honesty to every deal. Call Greg at 937-477-8975 today and tell him The Recovery Couch sent you. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to The Recovery Couch, where we deliver unapologetic, real, faith-based stories and messages covered by the blood of Jesus. This is a space where we speak from the heart without filters, because Psalm 139 verse 4 reminds us that God knows our words before we ever speak them. Romans 5:8 tells us that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. That's why the Recovery Couch exists, to meet people exactly where they are, because here we believe when you offer someone a space to be real, you're also offering them a space to heal. Today, I have a special guest who I'm excited to hear the story. My guest, Ben Buckland, was involved in an accident in 2016. And I don't want to steal the thunder here, Benjamin. So I'm going to pass it over to you. But first, I want to know how you doing today.
Doing pretty good. Yeah. The wife and I got to clean out the van. So it was nice. It looks a lot better than what it was.
Super cool, bro. So all the listeners, man, I don't know if you noticed, like I noticed, I'm sure you do. This man's got a golden voice that is about to actually start a podcast. But before we get to that, Benjamin, why don't you tell us about this accident in 2016 and then what happened after the accident?
Yeah, absolutely. So the accident happened where a coworker and I were throwing away a cultured marble countertop, and we were throwing it away into a 7-foot dumpster. And as we were throwing it away, it got caught on the lip of the dumpster and it snapped. And then that portion that snapped landed onto my left foot. And, I did the guy thing, right? Rubbed some dirt in it after I probably said some sort of expletive, right? And just kind of limped around the rest of the day and tried to finish the job that I had set before me. Went home, elevated it, took ibuprofen, and went to bed, just thinking, okay, I got, like my foot smashed by something, and didn't know that, the next morning when I woke up, I put my feet down onto the carpet, and it was the worst pain that I've ever felt in my entire life. It felt like I was getting stabbed, electrocuted, and lit on fire all at the same time. That was the beginning of that process where I would say my road to recovery started there in that moment. And ever since then, I've had chronic pain. I was diagnosed a few months after that with something called CRPS. And for those of you that don't know what that is, it's complex regional pain syndrome. And you can go and Google that and look up the McGill Pain Index and see the level of pain that I deal with on a daily basis. So that's kind of where the accident started. And then my road to recovery, I've been on that road ever since, and I'm still in recovery from it still. I sometimes don't sleep because of the pain, and I've been working hard to try to have some sort of normalcy in like sleep schedule, but it's really hard when you're always in pain. It's kind of like trying to read when you have a migraine.
Yeah, so let me get this straight, man. Cultured marble countertop, caught on lip of dumpster, fell on foot. You ignored the injury initially, and then you woke up the next morning, stood up, and your feet felt like they were stabbed, electrocuted, and caught on fire simultaneously. The only diagnosis is CRPS, or was there any broken bones in there?
No, so oddly enough, they had thought that I had broken a bone, but I actually didn't. It was just something that I had, like as far as like a defect from whether it was birth or before. And the thing that was interesting was that I wasn't wearing my steel toe boots that day. And part of me is wondering if I had been, would it actually have just essentially like cut off my toes because of how heavy the cultured marble was. So I was wearing tennis shoes. And I think that I got pretty lucky in that regard.
So, in a weird way, you think that
Mhm.
not wearing the steel toed boots actually saved your toes.
Yeah. It saved my
Unbelievable.
toes, but I don't know if it was necessarily a better, end result because of the chronic pain, and it could have happened regardless. Anybody that has any sort of injury has a really low percentage of a chance of getting CRPS. For crush injuries, it's 8% or 9%, and I just happened to be one of those percentages of people.
So, crush injuries, 8% or 9%. How did you
Mhm.
take this news knowing that you really basically like against all odds to even get this injury?
Yeah.
And would a broken bone have been better?
Mm. I'm not necessarily sure if a broken bone would have been better. I mean, it definitely would have been something that would have healed and then not had been something that was chronic, but you could have still ended up in the same result of having CRPS after the fact. You had asked something at the very beginning there. Would you repeat what you asked? I forgot.
Yeah. So, when the when it fell on your foot and you were diagnosed with CRPS, was that the only
Mhm.
diagnosis, or would a
Yeah,
broken
okay.
bone have been a better option?
Yeah, no, so that was, my end diagnosis. Originally, they thought I had an actual broken bone or a fracture, and it ended up that that wasn't the case. The When I was first diagnosed with CRPS, the doctor who gave me that diagnosis told me what I had and was white in the face, referred me to pain management, stood up, and then walked out of the room. And I was just like, I don't know what this is. And, my mom had to take me to my doctor's office visits because I wasn't able to drive. Just the pain was so bad. And, I get down and I can't remember if I was in crutches at the time or a knee scooter because I was in crutches for about 9 weeks. And then I was in a knee scooter for close to 4 years. But when we got down to the van, I was sitting in the van and I looked up what is CRPS, and I'm Googling, different things and learning, reading, okay, CRPS, complex regional pain syndrome, the most painful chronic pain diagnosis known to man with no cure, nicknamed the suicide disease. And I was very quickly overwhelmed by how essentially damning the news was.
Okay, so you start to learn more about CRPS, that it's nicknamed the suicide disease. I'm sure that that wasn't the first thing you learned about it, but eventually
No, yeah.
you learned that it's the most difficult chronic pain problem to have, known to mankind. It's known as the suicide disease. How does that affect your mental state and your relationships?
Yeah. So when I was younger, I actually went through a bout of really bad depression. I got beat up a lot as a kid and dealt with bullying a lot in school. And I had gone through a story where I had a plan to actually commit suicide, and that stopped by God's grace, where there was somebody in my life that intervened. Uh, Her name's Ashton, and she actually called me on the phone and um, talked with me about it. And that's something that or I could go into depth with and share the whole story, but it would take a long time to kind of share it all. But that's kind of the gist of it. And in that moment, I was thinking, well, why did this person call me? Why did they reach out to me when I thought that they didn't care about me? And she had asked me some questions that I hadn't really thought of at the time when I was so distracted by the pain of being bullied and the pain of being beaten up that I failed to see. And essentially, she got me thinking about my future and all the things that I would miss out on if I had ended it. And I legitimately think that that was a spiritual attack on me with the depression that I was dealing with and with those suicidal thoughts. And that God directly spoke through her to me. I mean, she was a middle schooler at the time, so was I. And the profound wisdom that she had in that conversation is something that I still carry with me to this day, and I don't doubt that God was using her directly to speak to me in that moment.
So you're saying that you, when I asked about the mental health and then how it
Mhm.
affected your relationships, you're saying I had already dealt with some
Yeah.
depression issues that led to
Mhm.
suicidal ideation, and I had
Mhm.
a spiritual encounter with a friend named Ashton who had kind of
Mhm.
awoken me spiritually.
Yeah.
But was that a preface to getting to like, yeah, this did have an effect on me mentally? This CRPS.
Yeah. I would say that it was one of those situations where I didn't realize at the time that God was using that former experience to prepare me for what was to come later on in my life. where, I definitely dealt with some of those suicidal thoughts. I didn't have the tendencies this time around because I was able to carry that story with me. And it helped encourage me to know, even though my pain is at, a 9 out of 10, or if somebody steps on my foot, 10 out of 10 or worse, and I am in pain where I can't move, I'm flexing all of my muscles because I just can't function or think or speak. And even in that pain, I would rather deal with that pain than end it all because I know that there's stuff in my future that I can still look forward to, right? And at the time, I didn't have kids. Now I do have kids. And that's something that I have um, been able to experience the joy of, right? Is my kids have brought laughter and joy into my family. That was something that I desperately needed. And I am able to now experience those things. And then looking forward ahead in my life, I get to experience, when they, grow up and get married and have kids of their own and become a grandparent. Like, I'm excited for those things. But I would say too I would say sprinkled in there too, there was a lot of generosity from other people in my life that then gave me the generosity that I should have had all along with God. Where um, I think I was in a coffee shop one day and somebody, asked me, "How are you doing?" And I just kind of shrugged it off, like, "I'm fine. How are you?" Just being, polite back and asking the same question. And they said, "God woke me up this morning. I'm doing really good." And was just grateful for the fact that God woke them up. And it kind of made me realize I don't think that I've ever thanked God for waking me up. So I started doing that on a daily basis. At first it wasn't, but I wasn't actually doing it every day, but I was trying my best to have that sense of gratitude. And then that gratitude began to essentially change me from the inside out, where I'm grateful for the next breath that I get because I know that it's not guaranteed, right? When God decides to take me home, there's nothing that I can do to prevent that. But what I can do is be grateful for what God does give me. He gives me another day. In the mornings, I talk with him and I thank him for that. And I thank him for all of the blessings that he gives me because I'm significantly blessed, even in my great pain. And that change slowly then created my focus from not being on this world, but to be focused on eternity and to focus on that mindset. And in that mindset, it's one of those things where I have the hope that I know that even if I'm not healed this side of heaven, I know that when I do die, that I will be healed from my pain and I won't feel pain anymore. And that's something that really encourages me to continuously endure the pain that I deal with.
So let me see if I get this straight, Benjamin, and correct me if I'm wrong. When asked if you had any mental struggles with the fact that
hmm
you have a chronic painful disease that affects only 8% or 9% of the population, and you find out it's nicknamed the suicide disease,
Mm.
does that take you into like any sort of mental health issues? And you kind of, I feel like you're kind of saying no. It actually, based off prior experience with mental health issues, or
hmm
that I knew that there had to be gratitude in the fact that I was dealing with something that was so difficult. Is that what I'm gathering?
Yeah, honestly, I would say that's a good way to summarize it all.
So you didn't deal with any sort of mental health issue post CRPS diagnosis.
No, I did, but it put me back into understanding from what I had dealt with prior and knowing that I have things to look forward to in my life helped me understand that and eventually that understanding from, hey, God intervened in my life when I had to deal with something similar earlier on. When I was then faced with that again, it was easier to go through. And then that then turned into gratitude for God because he was already active before that even happened. And to be able to see that and then understand and apply that to my life with that gratitude aspect, essentially that gratitude kind of like was planted as a seed early on and then kind of bloomed into a full blown tree is the
So
way that I would describe it.
yeah, sounds like you're saying you
hmm
already had confidence and faith in God. And I just read this thing yesterday that says confidence needs, what is it? Confidence needs evidence. So you had evidence from
Yeah, yeah,
God,
that's good.
right? And so that gave you
Hmm.
confidence that God
Yeah.
was going to uh, give you, blessings. And even though
Yeah.
you had to deal with this pain, I'm still going to be grateful. I'm going to
Hmm.
count my blessings. I'm not going to
Yeah.
focus on this, poor me type of situation. So yeah,
Right.
that's clicking. But how did
Hmm.
this affect the relationships so close to you? I mean,
Yeah.
does this limit your mobility? Does this
Hmm.
cause you, what type of issues are in your way today over?
Yeah. Well, I would say that it wasn't like an instantaneous thing where I really struggled like the first few years of my diagnosis, and I was miserable. And it was my wife told me that it was something where it was like I was in the room, but I wasn't present. So it's one of those things where I was so checked out because I was in so much pain that I was using all of the energy that I had just to try and survive. Right. And I wasn't doing the things that I should have been doing. I was turning to different vices to try to cover up and mask my own problems. Um, I turned to pornography a lot, and I had had former struggles with that growing up in high school. And eventually it got to the point where I was like, I need to seek help. I need to actually change or have God change me and pursue the benefits of what does this look like if I didn't struggle with those things? What if I, instead of, when tempted by pain or frustration and want to numb it, run to God instead of run to the things of this world? And ultimately, it's one of those things where, I've gone through addiction recovery. I went through a 12-step program. I've been in counseling for, I think, almost 4 years now. And through that experience, I am a significantly better person, but it's not because of anything that I've done. It's just because God has been slowly changing me. And the things that I deal with now today is so I am not able to walk without assistive devices, right? So I call it my exoskeleton leg. So I have a leg that is made of carbon fiber and it sits on the outside of my leg from the knee down and it has a foot plate. It's called, what is it called? I think it's called like a reactive brace with a PDE element. I don't really know what PDE stands for. Um, but then the other side of that is I also have, um, like, I can't walk without it on. So when I have it on, I'm able to actually walk, I'd say semi normally. And the way that it works is it removes the pressure from the ball of my foot and then moves it to my shin bone. So I'm able to actually move over it because I still have CRPS on the ball of my left foot. It used to be the whole foot was affected. And then after, I think it was like 3 or 4 years of desensitization therapy and aqua therapy and physical therapy, it regressed to just the ball of my foot. So I still deal with, pain every day. The more that I use it, the more that it hurts. The more that it hurt, the less that I want to do anything or move. And with all of that, I'd say like the most difficult part is how it negatively impacts my sleep. Is because whenever I am in a lot of pain, it's really hard to be able to calm down from it, right? And all I want to do is rest and sleep. But when my foot hurts so much, I'm just kind of like, okay, now what do I do? And I have a device called an H wave unit. Have you ever used a TENS unit before?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Yeah. So TENS unit is either like all the way on or all the way off as far as the waveform. With a H wave unit, it peaks and then drops down on an arc. And what that does is essentially it will pulsate the muscles to then bring in new blood flow, reduce atrophy, and then it promotes healing. And there's a high version of that that brings numbing into the situation. So essentially, you turn on the high frequency of that, and then that high frequency, you'll feel like a buzzing sensation or like a mild, like static electricity shock, and you turn it up until you just feel it, until you can't feel it. And then you turn it up a little bit more until you can just feel it, until you can't feel it. And you just repeat that cycle. So you'll start at maybe like a 2 out of 10 on the device, and you'll maybe get up to like a 7 or an 8 out of 10. Well, when I do that, it cuts my pain by 50%. And to me, that's amazing because they tried to get me to take fentanyl and morphine, and codeine wasn't even touching it as far as my pain is concerned. And I was like, I don't want to do fentanyl or morphine. I have an addictive personality. That just wouldn't be a good route. So that's I deal with those things, and there's probably other things that I deal with that I'm more like numb to, that I don't really like think off the top of my head. But like my leg will sweat randomly. It's super weird, or it'll turn like a dark scarlet color or like a red color, and it's just because there's reduced blood flow to the area, just because of the diagnosis that I have. So there's weird like nuanced things like that.
This episode of the Recovery Couch is brought to you by JB Davis at South Dayton Toyota. For integrity, service, and unbeatable deals, call JB and his team at 513-267-5225 and tell them the Recovery Couch sent you. Yeah. So, and how is this affecting like personal relationships? You know, have you ever been in a situation where you're like, I want to help you out, but I can't. And now I'm worried that you're thinking I'm just making an excuse because the task is tough. Does that ever happen?
Yeah, I would say really early on, I became like a recluse. I was like a shut-in, and I was that way probably for 5 years. Once I started, once I got my leg and started walking again and really trying to prevent from being couch-ridden and bedridden for, multiple years. I don't ever want to be in that situation again. I, started expanding out and developing relationships with people. And it's kind of hard for me to have, I'd say, like in-person friendships because I'm not able to do what a lot of other people can do. They're like, hey, I want to go play racquetball. I'm like, okay, I can't play racquetball, those kinds of things. Or, hey, let's go play pickleball. And I can't. Or sand volleyball. So I have to then look into specific things that I can do or am able to do that don't agitate my leg so much that puts me into a lot of pain. But because of my past experience in construction, I have a lot of the know-how of how to do things. And I really love helping people with their home improvement projects, right? So like I had a buddy of mine who was redoing his shower, and I actually did tile in high school. And I was like, hey, I can come and help you. Well, I'm sitting in his bathroom helping him and trying to lean over forward with my leg on. My leg doesn't collapse. So like the ankle area is stuck at 90 degrees, and I couldn't fit my leg into the tub and lean forward at the same time. So I had to take my leg off and then tuck my leg behind my other leg to start doing that. And then it was like a day or two later where my pain was through the roof. And I was just like, I have to be a little bit more careful with how much I help other people, because I don't want to help other people for the sake of then not being available for my own family. And that was something that I had to learn too, because I desperately like helping other people. And I feel like that's more of like a ministry side where I have this experience, I have this knowledge. If I could help somebody save money, why wouldn't I? And if I can come alongside them and even teach them how to do it or show them how to do it, that's great, because I want to help them so they don't spend that money. And then it's a great way to then have like relationship building with other people.
Yeah. So, and then what eventually happens to where you feel like, okay, man, I'm led to use this pain as a purpose. And then what type of steps do you start taking to, execute that?
Yeah. So early on, when my accident first happened, I started writing down the things that were happening because I had really bad short-term memory issues, just because the pain was always at the forefront of my mind. And those journals started to then like compound and compile. And then that became the basis for the book that I started to write. And, I'd let it sit for, a month or two and then go back into it and then, add some more stuff to it. But like really early on for the first few years, I was heavily writing in it almost daily. And a lot of it too was like prayers of me pleading and begging God to heal me. Right. And in my studies with that, I ended up like coming to a different conclusion. Like I know that there's people that will say, like God will answer your prayers as yes, no, or maybe. And specifically when you're asking God to heal you, I think the problem is that here in Western society, I don't know if you live in Western society or like the USA, we want results now. We don't want to wait for results. Like that's why we have Ozempic. That's why we have like gastric bypass, all these different things so we can have an end result as fast as possible. That's because we want things in our own time frame. And the issue that I was running into is that I wanted God to heal me in my time frame, not his. And understanding that his time frame may be until I die, but I know that when I do die, he will heal me. I won't have pain when I'm in heaven. Is that him saying no? Or is that him healing me in his time frame? It's just different from what I want. So I talk about that in my book, and I have scriptural evidence for that. And I talk about that at length. And that's something where I've come to that conclusion where I would say specifically, one second, when we ask God for healing of specific ailments, whether it is cancer or physical pain or chronic pain, I have chosen now to surrender the time frame of that healing to God because he knows what's best. And, when I think about it, if I would have just had him, or if he, let me rephrase that, if he would have healed me when I first asked, what would that have taught me? It wouldn't have taught me dependency on him. It wouldn't have gotten me closer to him. It wouldn't have allowed opportunities for me to then understand other people's pain the way that I do, or to be able to speak into pain the way that I can. And understanding that now and looking back at it, it's my idea of what I originally wanted was just skewed because I wasn't really thinking of what actually mattered, right? Like what matters is matters of eternity or the souls of men and women, right? And if I am, let me say it this way, if I have to deal with my pain the rest of my life, and that touches one other person and then they can then come into a relationship with Jesus, it'll all be worth it.
Yeah, amen to that. Hey, you can take your leg off?
Yeah, I can. So it, like the way that it works is you can, like, have you gone snowboarding? Do you know what a boa enclosure is? So a boa enclosure is like a locking mechanism, and then it's like a ratchet. So then it'll close your, like the shoe around your foot so it doesn't pop off when you're snowboarding. I've never gone snowboarding. I just know what the boa enclosure is because that's what's on the shin part of my leg. So it almost operates like this is the back piece of the leg, and then there's the shin piece. And then as you ratchet the boa, it will then close around my shin. So then that acts as a prosthetic cuff.
So your shin and your foot are still there, but you have the leg that comes detached goes over top of the foot and the shin.
And then the issue with that is that I've broken the carbon fiber many times, and they're like, yeah, it's strong as steel. And I'm like, I don't know if it actually is or not as strong as steel because I keep breaking them and then having to ship them off to Washington State. That's the only place that they make them. Well, I think there's a new place in Texas that helps manufacture them, which is helpful. So I don't have to have my leg shipped off for a month to get fixed because that takes a long time. Then I'm legless for a month, and then it's just hard to get around and have to pull out the old knee scooter and stuff. But I was like, later I can show you. It's kind of cool.
I want to see it so bad.
It's
dude.
it's really neat. I should have brought like some of my old parts downstairs so I could have like held them up to show you, but I didn't think of that.
In my mind, I'm picturing some Iron Man shit where like it, how when the costume is what I want to call it, but his uniform just kind of like forms
I'd
to
say
him.
it's similar. Yeah.
Heck
Not
yeah,
as cool,
man.
but yeah.
No, yeah. So cool, man. So I love, Benjamin, just how settled your heart is on understanding God is using my pain for a bigger purpose, that God has allowed me to go through some suffering in order to be able to testify that suffering is a part of my relationship with him. And then if I can just touch one person with my story, then it was all worth it for the kingdom of heaven. I think that shows wisdom beyond your years when it comes to your spirituality. And I'm just super duper commend you for that, brother. Let's do this here, man. Let's end with, I'm going to ask you a question. Let's say there's somebody who just dealt with an injury, serious injury, very recent, still in the hospital. And they're getting news similar to the news you got. This is CRPS. It's going to really affect you from this point forward. You're going to have severe pain. It's going to limit your ability to do normal everyday things. What would you give them as far as words of encouragement? This is day one. They just woke up.
Yeah.
The doctor's telling them that.
I think the best way forward would be to be as honest about how difficult the road ahead is, right? For too many years, I downplayed how bad like my pain was because I didn't want to bring other people down with me. Um, and it was almost like trying, like I would say, I've repressed some of the negativity of how bad it really was, and I didn't actually talk about how difficult it is. But I think if we're going to be honest, and I think honesty is the best policy when speaking about things that are really difficult in life, is to explain that the difficult road ahead is there. There is possible remission. So there is that level of hope. But I would suggest that the best way forward is to live life in light of eternity, right? Where I remember when I first talked to my dad about it, when I realized that what I had wasn't going to just go away. And the longer that you have CRPS, from my understanding of what I've written in medical articles and journals from like the CDC, the NIH, Johns Hopkins, and stuff like that, is that the longer you have it, the less likelihood that it will go into remission. And as I think about this, I told my dad that, and I said, it was like I got a cancer diagnosis without the "you're gonna die" part. But I wish that I would have been given the "you're gonna die" part, because then I would know when my pain would end. And my dad had cancer when I was in the third grade. He's a cancer survivor. And it was a hard conversation to have with him. But I think that being honest in that and understanding there's that level of grief because you're losing so much of your life and you don't realize it yet. It's a lot to deal with, but it's so much better to actually talk about the grief than to repress it. Because I repressed it for years and didn't realize that that was my actual problem, right? Is I had lost the ability to then go and play with my kids, like to go run and play ball with them or play football or baseball or basketball, right? To be able to help them ride their bike for the first time and run behind them and let go and then have them go for it and not have, training wheels, right? Like there's things that I've understood that I've had to realize that I cannot do. But just because I can't do all of those things doesn't mean that my life is bad, right? Like God has blessed me with things that I've never realized that I took for granted, right? Like having healthy children or having a wife that stayed with me when she had an opportunity. Or actually, I gave her the opportunity to leave me and she said no. And understanding that there are different situations in my life that this has placed me in to be able to speak into those areas and to essentially say, look, regardless of how bad my pain is, God is still good. And to share that with other people, I think is very powerful. But it's not powerful because I'm over here white knuckling it through it. I'm over here relying on the grace of God and the strength of God to give me the endurance every single day to be able to say that to people. Because there are days where I don't sleep. I'm got 3 hours of sleep, right? Or maybe 2 hours of sleep, and I'm, napping throughout the day. And I'm miserable on the inside, right? But I'll, still smile and say God is still good because I have that hope that I know that when I die, I will be healed. I won't deal with this pain anymore. And I want to live my life in a way that when I die and I meet God face to face, that he says, welcome, my good and faithful servant. Not, why didn't you talk about me more? Why didn't you speak about me more? And that's just kind of where my end goal is in all of this. And I would almost share that with that individual, is to say, there is a very specific calling God places on all of us, right? And I don't know what their calling would be, but it is entirely possible that God does heal you and you're able to share that story. But it's also possible that God's plan for you is to endure this until the end and still proclaim God's goodness in spite of it.
Amen, Benjamin. Yeah, you are so wise beyond your years when it comes to understanding this spiritual walk. And I commend you for that. And I also want to thank you for your bravery coming on the show
Yeah, thank
and
you.
sharing your experience and your strength and your hope. I want to also thank all the listeners for spending time with us today on the Recovery Couch. If today's conversation encouraged you, Share this episode with someone who might need it, and make sure that you subscribe so you don't miss what's next. If you want to go deeper into the journey of recovery, check out my book, Step 4 Journey Through Addiction, available wherever books are sold. And if you believe in the power of recovery stories, consider supporting the work that we're doing through the Recovery Foundation. It's called True Story Recovery Foundation, where we're helping bring hope, healing, and recovery resources to the community. Special thanks to our sponsors and supporters who help make these conversations possible. Special thanks to our guest, Benjamin. Thank you very much for being on the show, Benjamin.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Until next time, guys, remember, no matter how dark the road has been, your story isn't over. There is hope, there is healing, and with God, there's always a way forward. And you always have a seat right here on the Recovery Couch.